Hi BookTube and welcome to a new video. This is a Friday reads for 4 books I finished, all of them 5 stars, so a really good reading week, which is an antidote to last week's less than stellar reading week. Wolfgang Hilbig's I, translated by Isabel Fargo Cole. Lieke Marsman, a Dutch author. This is called The Opposite for Person, translated by Sophie Collins. Natalie Diaz, American First Nation poet. This is called Post-Colonial Love Poem, second collection of poetry. And finally, Yelena Moskovich, A Door Behind a Door. So I'm going to start with the Hilbig, which was a buddy read with Zena over at Beating Around the Books. So I'd read 3 of Hilbig's novellas, very short, and they were all 5-star. They were all wonderful. So this is my first novel of his. It's proper 300-page novel, and this is another 5-star. It is the preeminent book that you could want to read if you're interested in the operation of the Stasi, the East German sort of surveillance intelligence organisation that basically kept records on the whole of the population, as much as that could be done, especially in a pre-computerised age. So it's a story of a guy from a provincial town in East Germany where he's a stoker in a big industrial complex. He's in the basement where he sort of works in isolation, and he loves it because it leaves him a lot of time free on the job to write. As long as he keeps the ovens going, the rest of the time he's undisturbed and he can write because he's a writer. And the fact that he's a writer comes to the attention of the factory boss. Now, if you're a factory boss in East Germany, you're quite high up in the Communist Party, and you're plugged into the whole state surveillance mechanism. So this guy and his boss, they have discussions about the role of literature. The boss is delighted he's found someone who is interested in literature and produces it, and gradually our writer gets sucked into the world of sort of intelligentsia and surveillance and intelligence, because a very strange occurrence in his sort of arty circle in this provincial town, which is obviously quite small arty circle. There's a man and a woman, and they are in a sort of on-off again relationship. And our guy sort of fancies the woman, but behaves utterly sort of gentlemanly towards her because he knows that she's in a relationship, and maybe she'll come round to viewing him as the better option. And both of these other two end up behind bars for various sort of anti-state attitudes, not even actions. And our guy gets sucked in because obviously he's friends of both of them, and he gets sucked in by sort of the woman is pregnant, presumably by the other guy, because our writer guy has not slept with her. And the intelligence services sort of say, look, they're both banged up. She's going to have the baby in jail. Why don't you take responsibility by declaring yourself as the father? You won't have to pay anything because we will take care of it. The state will take care of it, and in return, all we ask is that you do a bit of sort of informing on our behalf. So that's how he sort of gets sucked in through his heart and his feelings towards these two. He takes ownership of a child that has nothing to do with him, and we don't even know if the child is real because she has it in prison, and even though she's released, he never sees the child. So by this sort of rather sort of strange, labyrinthine, almost Kafkaesque set of circumstances, he's now an official employee of the state intelligence services. He is sent to Berlin, where he is basically asked to infiltrate the writers and artists colony in Berlin, because in the eyes of East Germany there was a perpetual war between the workers and the intelligentsia, of which artists were the biggest part of that, and the intelligentsia and the artists were seen as dissenters. So they were asking this guy, because he has some track record as a writer himself, to attend these sort of secret readings, particularly with one guy that he's charged with getting the lowdown on. And he notices that there's this young woman from West Germany who attends these meetings. She's free to come and go. Obviously, the East Germans aren't free to go the other way. So these are the two people in his sights. And the book starts with him. He has access to any building in Berlin through their basements, which presumably were there for bomb shelters, air raid shelters during the Second World War. And he can navigate his way to any building through their basements. And the description of that, the opening of the book, is fantastic because it makes him out to be like a sewer rat, which is kind of what he is, really. And a bit like 1984, George Orwell's 1984, and Winston Smith's sort of secret niche where he has sex with the woman, believe that it's a blind spot, that the state authorities can't see him there. This guy thinks his basement is that sort of private space that no other citizen is privileged with in East Germany. But of course it's not, and it's penetrated, but whoever is penetrated will not reveal themselves. And this brings us on to another theme of the book. Who watches the watchers? So he's watching all these citizens, but who's to say that he's not infected with a desire to go to the West, to escape, and all this sort of stuff. And the way that the watchers are watched is they're perpetually kept off balance. That reality is completely shrouded in a sort of mad Kafkaesque sort of bureaucratic nightmare. And just to give you an idea of that, I lived in a world of the imagination. Time and again my reality turned fantastic, anomalous, and from one moment to the next the only tranquillity left me consisted in a barely tenable simulation. No wonder. We lived under constant pressure to take into account behaviour which might not even exist. We lived in a dichotomy. We were perpetually conducting intelligence investigations to clarify how far reality had already approximated our imaginings. But we couldn't let ourselves believe that our imaginings might actually come true. No, we disbelieved our own imaginings, so we conducted constant investigations clarifying for ourselves. And there was no reason to believe them. But it was difficult to investigate without imagining what this investigation was supposed to ascertain and, if necessary, prevent. If possible, nip in the bud, as was our explicit aim. So this sort of world of simulation is created. That is what these agents are charged with, spinning these webs, these fictions, against citizens. But it keeps them off balance because they can no longer tell what's true or false. He himself, when he fills out his expenses claims, he doesn't know if they're too many, too few, whether they're legitimate or not, because the system of the expenses being repaid to him it's not, it's opaque, it's not clear to him. And he suddenly wonders that this is a way that he is archiving his life as an informer through these receipts, and this is how the state keep watch on him. So this sort of world of sort of paranoia, simulation, what's true, what's not true, which is why it's called I, because he has several different code names, and it will switch seemingly at random in the book, and suddenly address him as another letter of the alphabet, and you realise it's the same guy. So he was this guy in this provincial town. He's got a double life as a worker on the one hand and as a writer on the other, and then a further double life as an informer for the factory boss. Then he goes to Berlin, where he's given a completely new personality, a different legend, a different name, all this sort of stuff. So he's lost the sense of who he is, the I. Is he a writer, or is he a worker, or is he just an informer for the Stasi? And his reports on citizens are repeatedly criticised for being too poetic. And yet he feels, as he sits down to write his own work, that it's been infected by the bureaucratic vocabulary of the Stasi. So he falls between two stools. He's lost all sense of himself. And it's just brilliant in that sense. I'm going to read, an example of the writing and credit the translator Isabel Fargo Cole for sort of the quality of her translation. I was spooked by places where I came up against the people, mind-boggling throngs of milling idlers, throngs crossed in turn by hurried masses pouring from the packed S-Bahn trains. And when I saw how the latter ranks had to fight their way through the snarls of loiterers, how they were slowed by the lethargy of those who merely moved from one snack stand to the next, I got nervous. And finally the hurriers seemed to succumb to the rubberneckers and gadabouts and started dawdling as well, transformed seamlessly into tourists, into schmoozing chatterboxes, who, seemingly oblivious to their duties, gazed at the facades, the monumental blocks of metropolitan architecture, the television tower, and the city hall. So I just think that's a brilliant piece of writing, where a whole population of East Berlin, who are, after all, his subject of study and observation and investigation, the workers in whose name putatively the state is run, they start off with a sort of two groups. One who are in place and they're just enjoying their evening out or spending time out, and then there's sort of the commuter rush of people who are coming home from work, pouring out of the tube station onto the street level, and these two groups sort of are entangled, and gradually, like two gases, one diffusing into other, is it the heavier into the light or the lighter into the heavier, whichever one it is, under Brownian motion or Boyle's law, whatever it is, gradually they all become dawdlers, and whether that was the intention of the commuters or not. I just think that's brilliantly described, and it's a wonderful depiction of Maxwell's demon, a sort of a thought sort of experiment. So the writing is superb in this as well. We the reader are kept off balance by the jump back in time between his time in the provincial town, time during his various different personas within East Berlin, his different names and stuff. But it is followable. As a reader, you can follow it. We are less confused and discombobulated than the lead character, I think. And while he's doing his sort of main investigation of this writer, who's called Reader, in East Berlin, gradually his mission, or the reason for his mission, changes, because the state changes its view that no longer are artists a good way into seeing what the dissidents and the intelligentsia are up to. Now they are a source of income, because the sort of East Berlin underground art scene can generate hard currency over in the West, because West Berlin and West Germany are more than happy to basically sponsor these sort of underground writers, this samizdat, and pay good money for it. And you realise that there are two levels of art, the creation of art in East Germany. One is the official, literature, where no writer can be published under that realm without it going through the censors, that they're happy that there's no sort of critical writing about the state. And then you have the unofficial, which is what this guy is trying to infiltrate, and is also part of, because he has some of his poems published in West Germany as part of his cover story, as part of his legend. But he's paid, the equivalent of hard currency for it. And gradually you realise that in all likelihood that's as riddled with informers and Stasi workers, and then it's not a legitimate, independent underground scene. It's a bit like G.K. Chesterton's The Man Who Was Thursday, where a policeman is sent to penetrate an anarchist cell of 7 members, and gradually realises that all the other 6 are all undercover policemen sent to penetrate this anarchist cell, which otherwise wouldn't exist. And it's a bit like that. And the translator's note in the back gives a bit of history of East Germany and Hilbig's himself. And that indeed that there were 2 famous writers in East Germany who were both informers within the movement for the Stasi, and there was a third who's actually effectively a Stasi agent, who was sent to set up or at least oversee the underground cultural scene, and these were all working for the state. Hilbig himself was arrested a couple of times, not for very long, but thrown in jail for a couple of months on trumped up charges, and interrogated. And although he himself claimed that he didn't really read the files once they were released after the fall of communism, he did read his own file. And what's remarkable, I think, about this book is just that he's spot on. He's nailed, everything about how it worked and the bizarre sort of smoke screens that it threw up and stuff, without really, according to him at least, doing a huge amount of research into it. He did interview people. I can't remember if he interviewed former agents, or whether he interviewed people like himself who were victims of that system. And interestingly, when the wall came down, he was no more enamoured of West Berlin and West Germany's culture. He thought it's too consumerist and stuff. So he was sort of a dissident from both sides of it. Anyway, an absolutely brilliant read, 5 stars. I have to say that although all 4 of these are 5 stars, it's going to be interesting to see whether they get into my top 10 reads of the year at the end. I mean, obviously they're in with a chance because they're 5-star reads, but at this stage I can't quite determine whether they're quite at the level that would get into my top 10. But anyway, that doesn't detract from their quality. So on to Lieke Marsman's book, The Opposite of a Person. And if you liked Jenny Ophil's Weather, this is very similar, but actually I think far superior. I say it's similar because basically it's a woman at the heart of each who has great anxieties about climate change in both of these, to the extent it sort of impacts on their daily lives, their daily relationships with partners and things like that. And both are quite sort of epigrammatic, they're quite short, punchy sections rather than sort of long developed chapters. They jump around from from the personal to the environmental to the planetary, very similar. This I think is better than that, simply because I think the human relationship at the heart of it are more interesting, and I also think they're more tied together. So this was I think I probably gave Weather 4-star. I mean, I can't remember now. But this, I think, is far superior. And again, a great translating job by Sophie Collins. So the character in this starts off as a little girl in Holland, imagining herself as a cucumber as she lies in bed. And then she realises that she can't imagine herself as a cucumber because cucumbers don't have consciousness. And as another level of that, if the roles were reversed, if she was a cucumber, she wouldn't have the awareness to realise that she can't realise herself into a human. So straight away there is this sort of divergence between human beings with consciousness and self-awareness and objects. And in a way, a lot of this book is about the status of the relationship between humans and objects, because the problem is human beings regard everything not human, and often in cases human as well, as objects, and that determines our relationship particularly to everything in nature, to flora, fauna, that they are objects for our use, our betterment, improve our quality of life. And it's a very destructive one-way relationship because that's how we regard objects. When she grows up, she's gone to university. I can't remember exactly what she starts off studying, but she switches to earth sciences, and that gives her interest in climate change. She forms a relationship with another woman, a very loving relationship. Her partner is doing a dissertation on an Italian author, I think from the 18th century. And the protagonist is riddled by anxiety. She's quite emotionally blocked. She's very sort of self-absorbed and self-involved because of all these anxieties playing around in her head. Anxieties around love, but also anxieties around the planet and just around daily occurrences and things like that. So she graduates, but she's not got anything to go on to, and she's looking for a job, and she lands a 3-month placement in Italy, in the Alps in Italy, looking at the effect of dams on sort of flora and fauna around them. And one of the little sections here is a history of catastrophic dam collapses in Italy. But this is more about the sort of immediate environmental effects of changing the course of water in the Alps. And I just think it's just brilliantly done. The meditations on love, some of them fall a bit flat, and yet others are supremely good. And I just want to read something which I think is so profound. Feelings are formless, so you can't expect to be able to trace their edges with words. So what she's talking about there is the fact that, the vocabulary to express emotions is negligible. That's why people write 300-page novels in order to basically land one emotion by the end. And it's very strange that we humans regard ourselves as superior because we have awareness, we have language, so we can communicate and we can, pass on ideas in a way that animals, can't. And yet, that doesn't stand up to scrutiny because our language isn't fit for purpose, because it can't even define the most fundamental parts of ourselves, which is our emotions, our heart, and which this character struggles with, throughout this novel. So in places, I think it's really, really profound on a sort of metaphysical level, really. And there's one towards the end, and I won't spoil it. There's one shocking event which I did not see coming. Completely surprised me. I don't know if that was an event was purely a metaphorical expression of her emotional state, or whether it actually happened as a physical event. And I having finished the book, I still don't know, but it doesn't matter because it was so powerful. As I say, because I didn't see it coming. So all in all, I thought this was terrific. 5 stars. And on to Natalie Diaz, a post-colonial love poem. I mean, who could resist a title like that? Not me. And a 5-star collection. There were 2 poems in here about basketball, which I wasn't expecting. And they were really, really, powerful about, I think one of them's called something like, how why Native Americans are good at basketball. And physically they may not be as tall as their opponents, but they have other things going for them. And I found that a really powerful one. There's lots of sensuous writing in here. Again, it's sort of queer poetry. I shall just read you one stanza of a poem called Ode to the Beloved's Hips. There's a lot about hips in this whole collection, but I love this stanza. More than all that are your hips. They are a city, they are a kingdom. Troy, the hollowed horse, an army of desire. 30 soldiers in the belly, 2 in the mouth. Beloved, your hips are war. And there's a lot in the collection about war, including the title poem, Post-Colonial Love Poem, which amalgamates love for one's partner with the war that one's nation, one's race has fought just to survive, with the riches of the earth, mainly in the form of gemstones and stuff. But they're not gems that are worn as costume jewelry. They're the gems in their original, where they lie in the earth and have such more radiance somehow. It's just a wonderfully sensuous, diverse in terms of theme and metaphor and things. And 5 stars. And finally, A Door Behind a Door by Yelena Moskovich. This book is going to be very hard to give you an impression of, but I loved it. It's written in very short sections, each has a little heading, and the pace and the rhythm just drive you through this book. It's not very long, it's 166 pages, but it took me a couple of reading sessions within a day to finish it, because the pace just propels you through it. Again, it's a queer work. That a woman in Russia, Soviet Russia, there's some unknown event happens in her apartment block when she's a child, and an elderly neighbour is found stabbed to death. Her family flee to America, leave it all behind them, and then that door back to that Soviet past is opened again when she receives a phone call from another neighbour who was her age or slightly older in that apartment block, who was imprisoned for killing this neighbour, for stabbing her. And he phones her out of the blue, says he's in Wisconsin, that her brother is in danger, and it all relates back to this. And that's how the plot is set up and framed. And what we get is a lot of a very claustrophobic set of characters. Her brother, this guy who was charged with stabbing. We get this woman's American lover. And then we get these other characters who get sucked into the plot because they apparently will hold the key for her to unlock what's going on and what relates back to this ancient history. So we get another Russian emigre woman who's in jail, and our woman ends up in jail temporarily. And we get 2 other women who work in a restaurant, or a bit of a dive restaurant, who claim that they will have the key to her understanding. So this is what I mean by it's quite hard to relate what it's about, because it's not. There is a plot, but it's not really about the plot. It's not about. She's not doing anything sort of metaphorical. She's not giving any messages. It's just each section propels you through the book. I can't describe it any more than that. I loved it. I really, really loved it. So much so I went out and ordered her previous book, which is called Virtuoso. I haven't read it yet. I'm sorry, I can't really give you more information than that. Not because of spoilers, or not because I didn't understand it. I mean, I'm not sure why what went on once they're in America went on, and what it all means, but that didn't matter. That didn't take away from the enjoyable experience reading this book. 5 stars. I'm not sure that this will get to my top 10, but it is quite unlike anything else I've read, and that also, speaks to its value as a read. I think you have to be a type of reader open to the type of book that maybe doesn't hang together or doesn't answer all the questions it poses. But if you are, give this a go. This was terrific. I do have a problem. So Yelena Moskovich herself was born in Soviet Ukraine in 1984. Her family left in 1991 and went to America, and she studied at university in Paris. So, when it comes to my spreadsheet, what country do I say she's from? I can't say she's Soviet Russian because she's Ukrainian, but she doesn't seem to be Ukrainian. She writes in English, therefore I've had to put her down as American in my spreadsheet. I don't know if that's right. She's also Jewish, but I don't have a column for Jewish writers. So that's slightly perplexing. At the moment, I've categorised her as as American. If you have any suggestions as to maybe I should recategorise her as something else, please let me know, because it stymied me a bit. So there you have what I've read. What I'm currently reading is my first Sarah Graham book, The City of the Dead, a Claire DeWitt mystery. So this is sort of detective fiction. I was drawn to this because it's presented as a fresh take on the PI, the private investigation genre. I have some feelings on that, but I haven't finished it yet. I'm about 2/3 of the way through. I will talk about this in my next video. And then The Schoolhouse by Sophie Ward, her new book, after she wrote Love and Other Thought Experiments, which I think 2 years ago when it came out was in my top 10 reads of the year. I love that. This sounds very different, but I'm very keen to read it. This will be my next read after I finish the Sarah Graham. And finally, just to say, I mentioned in my last video, and I'm going to trail it here, that Zena beating around the books and I buddy read Jean-Louis Borges's fictions, and last Sunday we recorded with 4 breaks for internet issues and the limitations of Zoom limiting you to 40 minutes recording time. We recorded a long video discussing most of the stories individually, which was fantastic fun to do. We have decided to split it up into 2 separate videos. They will be posted on Zena's channel. I will publish the link as soon as I have it, and I'll use the YouTube community function to send out a message once I have the link. I suspect they won't come out at the same time, but watch this space. It was a really, really enjoyable discussion. And just to say that for Zena, it's quite a key secondary text to her dissertation, which is on Danielewski's House of Leaves. So the Borges very much fed into that for her. So there you have it. Till next time, thanks very much.